At one point, where I had quit making saddles and quit doing very much leather work, well, I was trying to do construction work, and every once in a while I'd decide to do some leather work, and then I'd go back to construction. And finally, I just decided that the easiest way to get out of leather work was just to sell my tools. And I called a friend of mine, Ted Pacina. He had told me at one time, he said, if you ever decide to sell your tools, says, call me. So I called him, and he come over, and well, between the time that I called him and the time he got there, I started having second thoughts. So I went in and pulled out the bare essentials to do some leather work. So I could, because I still like to and fooled with guns, and so I like to build holsters, so I just kept just enough to, I could keep on building holsters and a belt or two every once in a while. And Ted went ahead and bought what was left. So I thought that was it. Well, construction got a little slow, so I started looking for leather work to do. And there was a guy down south of Mineral Wells on the interstate, and he said, or somebody told me that he was wanting to get a hold of me. So I called him, and we talked a little while, and so I went to work for him. And he had a rattlesnake ranch. So, you know, Texans are always looking for something to round up, so this guy fixed him up a rattlesnake ranch. And you don't have to have very many acres to run a lot of head of rattlesnakes. But what he did, he fixed up some pits, concrete pits. It was about 15 foot deep. And there were holes in the sides so snakes could make dens. And he fixed a big walkway. These pits were lined up, and then there was a walkway in front of every one of them. And there was a fence up where a youngster couldn't fall over in there or something. And he was right on the interstate, so he put him up a great big sign on the interstate, Rattlesnake Ranch, come and visit, and something like that. And he had a little gift shop, and everything that he sold was geared to snakes or rattlesnakes and animals. And he even kept one or two live snakes in cages in the gift shop. And at different times he had different stuff in there, live tarantulas, and I think at one time somebody told me that he had a bobcat in there in a cage. And well, what he really wanted me for was not to round up rattlesnakes, but he wanted me to make items, belts, billfolds, out of the snake skins, the rattlesnake skins. He and one or two people that worked for him there on the ranch, they would kill the snakes, skin them, process the meat, and cure the hides. And he sold the meat, and he turned the hides. He sold some hides, but he kept most of them, and we turned them into belts and billfolds. And he had a route that he made in truck stops. That's where he sold most of his stuff, at truck stops along the interstates in Texas. And the truckers loved them, I guess. They sold a lot of them. Gosh, I built a lot of belts and billfolds out of rattlesnake skin. He would go to rattlesnake roundups, which is real popular in Texas and Oklahoma and other places too, I'm sure, but that's the ones I knew about was in Texas and in Oklahoma. And he would go and buy the snakes that they caught. The people that hunted the snakes rounded them up, as they were called. They would go and pull them out of their dens and run them out of their dens and catch them and bring them in. And they had a contest for the biggest snake and the most pounds. In other words, you could put a whole bunch of smaller snakes. If you caught them, you could put them in your sack and weigh the whole thing, and you got a prize for the number of pounds that you brought in, and then they'd give a prize for the biggest snake. And they would put them over into this pit, a portable pit that they would bring with them. And somebody that was real knowledgeable about snakes, they would give lectures to people, those tourists, the people to come to see it. And they would serve rattlesnake meat cooked, and different, had a lot of stuff to eat. They would feed people. They could watch the snakes and listen to the talks, and people would wander around in these pits just like it was every day. Of course, they had protective boots on, most of them. Some of them just had regular boots on, and I don't know, worked for them, but I sure wouldn't. So anyway, this guy would go to all of these roundups. And in the summertime, the fall especially, they would be all over Texas and Oklahoma in the rattlesnake country. And he would bring back truckloads of these things. He had a 16-foot trailer and a 1-ton dually pickup. And he had, I think they were wooden cases that carried, they shipped artillery shells in. And they were about 30 inches long, about, 12, 16 inches wide, and about maybe 10 inches high. And he had taken these, and originally they just took some screws out and the lid lifted off. Well, he took and put hinges on these lids and then put a latch on them. And he would stuff them things full of rattlesnakes and load them things on that trailer and in that pickup and haul them home. And one day I saw him come in, and he had, he had about 4 layers of them boxes on that 16-foot trailer. And it was 16 foot long and about 6 foot wide. And he had 3 or 4 layers of those boxes on that trailer. And then he had his pickup full, loaded up to cab height and tied down. Of course, he had the ones on the trailer tied down too. And one day I went out there, and he had backed his trailer up to the entranceway to the gift shop, and there was 2 Oriental men there, and they'd pull a box off and dump it right there. A whole wad of rattlesnakes. And then they'd sort them out and put some of them back in that box, and the Oriental guys, they'd pick out what they wanted and they'd put it in their box. I got up on the trailer. I didn't even want on the ground with that bunch. I asked him one day, I said, what in the world would you do if you had a wreck coming home with one of these loads? He said, it'd be all over with for me. He said, them things would be madder than a hornet. By the time if I broke any boxes open, they'd be mad and they'd just be hunting for something to bite. But he says, so far I haven't had no problems bringing them in. But I kid people about working on cowboying on a rattlesnake ranch. But they held a little community craft show and get together and just kind of entertainment thing. It was an open house for the Rattlesnake Ranch, and they invited some crafters to set up and display their crafts, and they had a snake pit and they had snakes in it and giving demonstrations. And so my wife and I had been doing some crafts, so we decided, well, let's go down there and set up. Well, we went down there and set up and sat all day, and about the only thing we got rid of is something we traded to somebody else. But we were sitting there and watching. The pit was kind of out in front of us, and all of a sudden this kid, he jumped out of that thing, run over to a table that was sitting there and grabbed something out of the table and yanked his boot off and started working on his foot. And so I went down there to see what was going on, and the snake had bit him. And he didn't have any protective boots on. He just had slip-on Wellington type boots and Roper type boots. And snake had nailed him. And he was a doctor in it. They kept a snake bite kit there all the time. And some of them guys says they have been bit so many times that it don't bother them anymore. But that's not for me. I don't think I would want any of that. But there's no telling how many hundreds of belts and billfolds I made him with snake skin on them. They were just cheap as. I would build the insides myself out of just the cheapest stuff I could find. And as long as it had rattlesnake on it, that's all they cared about, I guess. After we moved to Columbus, I went to a Leather Guild show held here in Columbus. It was a nationwide guild show, I guess. We had people from Japan and all over at the show. It was pretty big to be a guild show. And I met this guy, it's kind of interesting. He was a tool collector, and he had a big display of tools, leather tools. And gosh, he had a bunch that I'd never saw before. So we had wife and Evelyn went with me, and we had wandered around, and I'd saw some people I knew, and we'd talked, and who was it? I got to see Bill Gomer. I'd met him once at a Gill show in Kansas City a few years before that. Met Bill, got to talk to him just a little bit. He was busy and he didn't have time to chit chat much. We got to talk to him a little bit. Anyway, this guy that had all these tools, somebody, I don't remember now who it was, come by and said, "There's a guy wanting to meet you." And so we followed him and we went back over there to the tool display. He was a tool collector, like I said, and he had brought in a display just for the Gill show. The people that were putting on the show asked him to come in and just put on a display, so that's what he did. He had a bunch of tools, man. He had 2 or 3 tables full, racks of them on the tables and stuff. And so anyway, they took us over there and introduced me to him. And his name was Doug Freitas. And he said, "I have been looking for you." I said, "Okay." And so he told me a story about he had been trying to find me, and while we had the craft mall down in the Continent in Columbus, on the north end of Columbus, he had come down there and tried to find me. He'd heard that we had a little store down there, but he